Husband's been secretly taking lessons to start a new career with a woman has been dating online, and I'm going to say it the way you rip off a bandage you've been lovingly moisturizing for months. I'm Lena, I'm 31, and I'm a high school art teacher who can tell the difference between paint that's drying and paint that's pretending, which is relevant because apparently my marriage has been doing both at once and calling it progress. It started with a calendar invite that wasn't mine. Not dramatic, not lipstick on a color cinematic, just a little gray rectangle on my laptop screen at 5:42 a.m., blinking like a quiet doorbell. Course, Product Design Foundations, Module 3. Location, Zoom Studio with N. I didn't recognize the calendar color. I didn't even recognize the email account, his name with a dot and a number, and the kind of domain people use when they think they're clever for not using their main one. I was sitting at our dining table in the blue pocket of morning you get in late winter, grading a stack of charcoal portraits where everyone accidentally gave their self-portrait the same heroic jaw. My husband, Jonah, 33, supply chain analyst, lover of white sneakers and podcasts about people who optimize their omelets, had fallen asleep on the couch with a blanket like an argument about whose turn it is to fold laundry. He twitched in his sleep like a dog chasing a solution. I didn't open the invite. I didn't need to. I stared at it the way you stare at a crack in a ceramic bowl and decide whether it's character or the beginning of goodbye. Then his phone, on the edge of the coffee table, lit up with a notification, "See you in 2 hours." I made the worksheet. Bring your sketches. N. The name was just an initial, like you do when you want to sound efficient and untraceable. I told myself to relax. Maybe N was a mentor, a nickname for his boss, a person whose name is actually Nicholas but who lives in a bullet list. People learn new things, right? You're allowed to learn new things after 30 without needing a permission slip signed by your spouse, right? I teach teenagers who come in on a Monday suddenly obsessed with ceramics because of a TikTok, and I do not shame them. People have inner lives. People have whims that aren't warnings. People also take classes at dawn because they don't want to be asked about them. I didn't become a detective right then. I made coffee, the kind that tastes like permission if you put enough milk in it. I balanced a mug on the gap between my wrists, read the critiques my students had written for each other. The shading is brave, the nose looks like it's running away, you are the light, and then I looked back at the calendar square. Product Design. Module 3. Zoom with N. I let the words sit in my mouth like hard candy. They tasted like deflection and a little like citrus. At 7:58 he startled awake like he'd been pushed by the day. He's beautiful in the morning in that stupid way some people are when they haven't had to assemble their faces yet. "Hey," he said, voice past tense, "what time is it?" "Almost 8, I said. He checked his phone, electricity running behind his features, and then he said, "Oh shoot," like a man remembering a dentist, not a dream. He kissed my hair where it is always stuck up, yawned the apology of a person who sleeps like he works for sleep, and padded off to the office. He shut the door carefully, like you do when you aren't trying to wake a child, or when you are trying not to wake the part of your life that would ask questions. I gave him 20 minutes out of decency. Then I walked down the hall and stood with my ear against the door like the world's least subtle cliché. I heard a woman's laugh, not dirty, not sparkly, just the kind you give to someone you're already comfortable disappointing. "Okay," she said in that online teacher cadence. "Screens on? Where's our sketchbook boy?" I closed my eyes. I pictured Jonah raising his hand in our office where the ficus is always doing too well. "Here," he said, and he sounded younger than his body. He started describing a project, an app interface for a marketplace of vintage repairs, which is exactly the kind of noble capitalism he likes, and the woman N said, "Yes, exactly, that's the through line from last week," in a voice that said there's history here. Not just Module 3. Modules ago. I don't know what you think I did next. I did not barge in. I did not record it. I did the thing women do when we are trying to see if the house is on fire or just heavy with someone's toast, we tidy. I straightened the books on the shelf. I watered the plant. I wrote down product design in my planner as if it were a homework question, and I planned on doing the reading. And then I went to work and pretended to care about an email from a dad who didn't like his son's self-portrait because it was too abstract and weird, which means the kid had drawn himself accurately. When I came home, the office smelled like breath and blue light, and I could see the ghost of a sketch on the desk. Rounded buttons, marginal notes in Jonah's clean, hopeful handwriting, a little star next to one labeled "An idea." That question mark made me angrier than anything. Not because he was collaborating with a stranger, but because he was careful with the credit. He had put a question mark next to the heart. I asked him about it that night, the way you ask your hairdresser to go shorter and you know it will either be freedom or a hat. "What's the class?" I said. I was smiling. I'm good at smiling with my molars. He smiled back too quickly, like a reflex. "Oh," he said. "It's nothing, just a little online course thing. For, to keep up." "Keep up with what?" I asked. "Delivery KPIs. He laughed too loudly. "No, like design stuff. I've been thinking about transitioning into product design. A few people at work have," and he trailed off like a train leaving a station without all its passengers. "That's great," I said, because on paper I'm the person who encourages learning like it's religion. But I waited. I left silence like a trap. He didn't fill it with anything that sounded like me. "Who's then?" I asked, and that was when his eyes did the flicker. It is not the flicker of a liar exactly. It's the flicker of a person deciding whether the version of the story that will offend you least is the version they can bear to hear themselves say. "Natalie," he said. She's just part of the cohort. We got paired on a project. She's good at feedback. She's in Berlin." He threw that in like a life preserver for my imagination. Berlin. Far away. Sexy and therefore safely unobtainable. But his flaw has always been that he assumes geography can stand in for character. I nodded and said, "Okay," because I never punish people for the first truth they manage to say. We ate dinner. We watched an episode of a show we like because it pretends people can fix things with witty monologues. We went to bed. He fell asleep with the relief of a man who has left a burning building and hasn't yet noticed his shoes are warm. I lay there listening to the negative space in his breathing. The next morning I graded more portraits and wrote 2 sticky notes that I put in my pocket like talismans. "Questions are not accusations, and what would you tell a student?" I teach kids to name what they see. To draw what's there, not what they wish they saw. To put down shadow before they commit to light. I decided to do that. That afternoon, while Jonah was out walking off a podcast, I took his laptop, not with stealth but with the dignity of someone who pays half the internet bill, and opened the browser. He hadn't bothered to clear anything because he thinks hiding is an event, not a habit. The learning platform was cheerful. There were chat logs with a dozen first names and 2 usernames that made me want to ban the entire internet. Natalie, there she was, and with her camera on, a woman with hair like a decision and a smile like an answer. Their messages were not explicit. They were worse. They were efficient dumb, the way you talk when you think your self-control deserves a medal. "Send me your Figma file, so good," the subtle shadow under the button face with open mouth. "One day we are going to build something ridiculous together. Promise you'll apply to the fellowship. Promise you'll move. Berlin misses you already, lol." Then an adjacent window. A Discord server. A private channel, N+Joe. It was archived, one of those details people think is grown up. The last 3 messages were: N. Booked the typography workshop. You better show. I'll wear the jacket you like so you can pretend you came for kerning. Jonah, you're a menace. I'm a coward. And I want this. N. You have it. You just have to admit it. I closed the laptop because I felt like I had swallowed a thunderstorm. My hands were shaking. I did the thing you do when you're about to cry but still have control sticks in your hands. I washed a cup with too much attention. I considered my options. Call a friend? I have Maya who will arrive with soup and a bat. Text my sister? She would drive 4 hours, cry on my couch, and then bully me back into my own body. Instead, I pulled out my phone and recorded a voice memo because sometimes I understand my truth only if I hear it aloud. "Hi," I told my future self. "Today you found the doorway. You don't have to run through it yet. You can also install a lock." When he came back, cheeks flushed from pretending to exercise while actually just listening to content, I sat him down and put the laptop between us like a mediator. I said. No preamble. No syllables of mercy to soften it. His face didn't change right away. Then it did a small, awful thing, like a child learning his favorite teacher thinks is ordinary. Okay, he said. His voice was very young. Okay. I was going to tell you. When? I asked. Before or after typography? He laughed helplessly at that and then covered his face because humor is a reflex for both of us, and we keep misusing it around bleeding things. He put his hands down. I met her in the cohort, he said. She's brilliant in the way that makes you feel like your brain is pants that actually fit. He swallowed. She also made me feel like I could be someone else before I had to earn it. At work, I'm the guy who fixes the spreadsheet. With her, I was the guy who draws the first version. Did you sleep with her? I asked, because the administrative checkpoint still matters, even when everything else is interior design. No, he said quickly. No. Not yet. That little word tried to seduce my anger, and my anger did, to its credit, slap it away. Are you planning to? I asked. He blew out a breath. I was planning to plan to, he said, and the honesty of that made me want to throw something. I booked a flight to Berlin for the workshop. I told myself it was for the work. It wasn't. I needed the story that I'm brave and decisive and not this person who gets stuck in the part where he wants to change and never does. And what about me? I asked. What am I in that story? He looked me in the face, which I'll give him. Home, he said. Which is the worst compliment when someone is trying to get out of their own life. I nodded because there it was, the sentence people don't say until they think it will earn them mercy. I didn't feel merciful. I felt present. I said, I'm not going to compete with an experience that exists primarily in your hopes. I can't fix this for you because this is the first thing you've wanted in a long time that isn't mine. But I can ask for rules while we figure out whether I want to be here when you finish wanting. We made rules. They were boring by design. He would withdraw from the cohort, yes, the whole cohort, not just the chat with Natalie. He would email the program lead publicly, not DM anyone privately, and say he needed to step back for personal reasons. He would cancel the Berlin trip while I watched and then send me the confirmation and the refund, so I didn't have to turn into a checkout page cop. He would book a therapist for himself and one for us together. He would move to the guest room for a while, not as punishment, but so the bed could stop trying to hold two stories that were arguing. He would give me access to the email account he made specifically to be brave, because he doesn't get to be brave in places I don't exist. He would write to Natalie, and the message would be one that closes, not one that invites applause for how noble he is at quitting. He did all of it that night. Not because he's crusadingly good, but because I sat there and said now, and because sometimes people behave because you gave their executive function a chair. And then we did what people don't talk about because it's tedious, we kept being alive. I still went to school and told a sophomore that her drawing of her own hand was trying to leave the page in the best way. He still went to work and made a PowerPoint about palettes that somehow charmed his team into caring. We spoke to a therapist named Shuri who looks like a librarian in a movie and whose questions sound simple until they sit in your bones and grow furniture. She asked him, "What do you think design gives you that your life doesn't?" And he said, "A draft." She asked me, "What do you deny him because you think it's your job to be the flaw?" And I said, "The chance to be bad at something he loves." It was a gross sentence to hear come out of my mouth. It was true. We made other rules, softer ones. We instituted what Shuri called a studio hour twice a week at our own table, where we both make things. He stumbles through wireframes with pencils, I do tiny paintings on index cards. We talk only like peers, not spouses, which is both fun and excruciating because it turns out he is actually interesting when I'm not shaping his sentences into what I need them to be. We started putting our phones to charge in the kitchen at 9. He hates it like a toddler. He does it anyway. He stopped listening to productivity podcasts and started listening to interviews with actual artists who say things like, "Some days you just make mud." He began owning the mud. And Natalie? She wrote back once. A single paragraph. I'm disappointed, but I get it, she said. You were building a story with me and a life with someone else, and you can't do both without it becoming a case study in cruelty. I hated and respected her for that sentence in equal parts. I blocked her everywhere on instinct, not because I thought she'd come through the phone, but because my nervous system deserves fewer doors. Here's the part one don't want to fumble. I didn't decide to stay because he cancelled a flight or because he cried on our kitchen floor like a person who'd been told the last bus left. I decided to keep deciding. A day at a time. A week at a time. I asked for proofs I would have laughed at 2 years ago. Show me the calendar, show me the email, tell me when the urge visits, and don't make it my job to shoo it away. He did. He told me when a sudden Berlin-shaped ache punched him while he was waiting for the kettle. He told me when he wanted to send her a link to something stupid about typography and didn't. He told me when he caught himself narrating a version of me that would make his choices easy to justify and stopped. He told me the truth before it was convenient, which is a sentence I didn't think he had. He didn't give up design. I didn't ask him to. He enrolled in a different course, one that cost money you could see on the joint credit card and happened at times that didn't require whispering. He showed up to Zooms with his camera on and his ring visible. He put his last name on the student roster. He joined a local meetup in a coffee shop where people draw on napkins and talk about grid systems like they invented angles. I went once, sat in the corner with a tea, and watched him talk to a stranger about failure unflinchingly without trying to flirt with an exit. It made me want to kiss his face off and also donate $5 to the gods of late bloomers. Maybe you're waiting for a betrayal encore. It didn't come, not in the fireworks way. What came were small scares that felt big and got smaller because they were faced. I found him lingering too long over an Instagram video where Natalie was speaking at a conference. He saw me see him, close the app, and said, I miss the idea of who I was with her, not her. I told him that was either growth or PR. He said both, and I thought, good, his learning design. My students drew self-portraits again last week. They're better now, of course, because now their noses have decided to stay and their hair isn't a helmet, and they all accidentally left in the bump on their eyebrow that only they think is ugly. I had them write titles for their own faces. My favorite was from a kid who never says anything out loud, Girl in the Act of Not Leaving. I stood in front of it for a long time because it was beautiful and also a memo I needed. If you are me in your kitchen at 8 a.m. with coffee you can't taste and a husband who's in the office whispering into his ambition with a woman whose laugh you now know by waveform, here's what helped and what didn't. Helped, recording myself. It kept me from narrating the story in a key that wasn't mine. Helped, lists with verbs, not theories. Cancel. Withdraw. Disclose. Schedule. Block. Begin. Helped, letting myself be petty for exactly 15 minutes a day. I would allow myself to draft the pettiest text imaginable and then delete it with ceremony. It was a weird little church. Didn't help, trying to be the cool wife who says go explore when everything in me wanted to say come home. Didn't help, pretending Berlin is a place and not a person. Didn't help, revenge fantasies involving art supplies. Trust me, the paint will stain what you love first. Where are we now? In a house where the office door is open and it's loud when it's loud on purpose. In a marriage where the word draft is a mercy, not an excuse. On Tuesdays we have studio hour and we sometimes make ugly things and hang them on the fridge anyway. On Thursdays we see Shuri and she asks obnoxious questions like, what is your design spec for how you want to fight, and we actually answer. His applying for a junior product role at work out loud with references who know exactly who he is. I am starting a community class for adults who think they can't draw, because it turns out I am as evangelical about smudgy charcoal as he is about buttons with the right radius. Do I trust him? Enough to be here. Enough to keep the guest room as a guest room, not a quarantine. Enough to let my body unclench when his phone lights up. Enough to laugh at jokes about counting again without tasting iron. Sometimes the temptation still visits like weather. I have learned to open the window. Sometimes he says he misses the adrenaline of secrecy and I say, that's not a feeling. That's a chemical, and he nods like a man who finally knows the difference between craving and wanting. Sometimes I dream of a city where every cafe table is full of people planning futures with people they met on good internet days. In the dream, I walk around with a sign that says, "Please include the ones you promised." I didn't become a hero by staying. I didn't become a fool either. I became a person who can name what she sees while the paint dries and the room smells like something we can live in. And this morning, when the calendar pinged, it said Studio Hour, Sketch Bad Ideas, and both of our names were on it, and I laughed so hard I startled the ficus. He looked up from the table where he was making a delightful mess and said, "What?" I said, "Nothing," and then because we are learning, I said, "Everything. Come look." And we did, together, at something neither of us would ever frame, and we loved it because it was ours and ugly and honest and exactly the right size for the fridge.